Have you ever seen a revisionist Western film from the 90s? Well, there's a strong chance you've witnessed Wes Studi in action. From community theater to the Oscars, Studi is working to change the role of Indigenous characters in Hollywood and inspire the next generation of Indigenous actors and actresses. Wesley Studi is a Cherokee American actor and film producer born on December 17, 1947 in No Fire Hollow, Oklahoma, in a rural Cherokee county. Until elementary school, the only language he spoke at home was Cherokee. He experienced how Indigenous people were treated off the reserve early in life when he would visit neighboring towns as a boy, and he felt shopkeepers would always be suspicious of him. He lived with his mother, Maggie Studi, who was a housekeeper, and his father, Andy Studi, who worked as a ranch hand. At the age of 17, Studi enlisted in the American Army and served in Vietnam for 12 months. After he returned home from service, he became a strong activist for the American Indian movement. Studi was arrested and jailed on federal charges of insurrection after his participation in the AIM face-off with the FBI at Wounded Knee in 1973. He was working as a horse trainer and reporter after his release and began acting in the American Indian Theater Company in Tulsa, his first role being in the play Royal Hunt for the Sun. Not long after, he moved to Los Angeles to pursue acting. After coming home from the war, Studi felt the need to chase the adrenaline rush, and acting was fearful enough to cause the excitement he craved. In 1988, Studi got his first role in the film The Trial of Standing Bear as the character Long Runner. After this debut role, he was cast in the award-winning film Dances with Wolves in the small yet vital role of Toughest Pawnee. After these roles, he became well known for his portrayal of fierce warriors, and this reputation led him to the role as Geronimo in the film Geronimo, an American Legend. All critics agreed that Studi fulfilled the role of the Apache leader with tact and delivered a layered performance. And Studi himself said that the film was an accurate portrayal of one of the most feared Indigenous warriors in history. The character was not idealized and was written to be as brutal as the real Geronimo was. In his performance, Studi attempted to mirror the stubbornness and resilience of the man who was trying to protect his people. In the 90s, there was an effort to humanize the roles of Indigenous characters. Consequently, the change in the role of the Indigenous characters caused curiosity with the public. So they're really still here, huh? So the genocide we tried on them didn't work? They're still around, and they're still trying to get into this movie business, says Studi. Later in his career, he made an attempt to audition for roles not based on his Indigenous heritage. Eventually, he landed the part of Sphinx in the 1999 comedy Mystery Men. Studi was a part of some of the biggest revisionist Western films in the 90s, all of which feature his stoic performances. However, he was able to land comedic roles such as Cochise in A Million Ways to Die in the West and Sphinx in Mystery Men. Despite his extensive career, it is far from over, as Studi also appears in the 2019 film Badland. The 1993 film Geronimo, an American Legend, is very similar to Dances with Wolves. Both films are part of the 90s revisionist Western genre that begin to feature a more sympathetic view of Indigenous characters. However, both films feature narration from the point of view of the white protagonist, which consequently creates a white voice speaking on behalf of the Indigenous characters. Both films also show the moral emptiness of white society. In Dances with Wolves, Lieutenant Dunbar is in direct opposition with his military superiors because he sees the Sioux people as equal. Likewise, the military in Geronimo blatantly lies to the Apache people and forces them onto a reserve instead of granting them their freedom. This argues the white man's poor treatment of Indigenous peoples by portraying the military as hateful and morally empty. The film Geronimo ends with the Apache people being relocated to a reserve in Florida and the narration recounting the death of Geronimo himself. Similarly, with Dances with Wolves also has narration that reveals the Sioux people died later on. Both these endings suggest that Indigenous people cannot survive in modern society, and they fit the Thomas King trope of the dying Indian. The 2005 film The New World is a film about the story of Pocahontas that would fit into Unit 1 representation in Hollywood. Even though the film features real Indigenous people and the roles of Indigenous characters, it is riddled with issues of misrepresentation. One of the types of misrepresentation mentioned in Unit 1 about the revisionist Western genre is the Indian princess stereotype, where Indigenous women are shown to be passive victims and the object of white desire. In this film, Pocahontas is exiled from her own people and then abducted to be used as a bargaining piece between the English and Indigenous people. She is also heavily eroticized in her relationships with John Smith and John Rolfe. Moreover, the king trope of the dying Indian is seen as Pocahontas is assimilated into Western society, which reinforces the Puritan view of Indigenous culture impeding progress. Recently, the Wet'suwet'en people have been protesting against the natural gas pipeline that threatens to cross their traditional lands in northern British Columbia. In 1997, the Supreme Court ruled that the hereditary Wet'suwet'en chiefs were the rightful holders to the title of that land. However, the case of the Aboriginal title lands was sent back to the court for procedural reasons and was never looked at again. The Supreme Court of BC ruled an injunction for construction to commence. Indigenous land protesters set up camps along the checkpoints for the pipeline and were forcibly removed by militarized police with weapons.
And about 2 minutes ago, we were informed that they had made their first arrest at 39 Kilometer at the support camp, where nobody's in violation of the injunction, and they're just there to witness what's going to be happening on the territory today.
A similar struggle is seen in Geronimo, an American legend, as the Apache people were forcefully removed from their traditional land and moved into a reservation to become farmers, which is far from their traditional lives. Geronimo fought fiercely against the military for his people and land, much like the brave protesters who were fighting for their land in British Columbia. Their camps were not blocking any roads and were not in violation of any injunction area. Throughout his 30-year career, Wes Studi is always concerned with bringing Indigenous culture and activism to the public eye. When he hosted the Oscars in 2018, being the second Indigenous person to ever host the Oscars, the first being Will Rogers in 1934, he spoke Cherokee during his speeches. For him, it was a normal occurrence, as his first language is Cherokee. He also is the first Indigenous person to win an Academy Award for acting in 2019. Not only is he a celebrated actor, but Studi has also written 2 children's books in Cherokee and translated the stage play The Kentucky Cycle into Cherokee. I am a Cherokee first, an American second, Studi explains. I will forgive, but I will never forget, and I will pass that feeling on to my children.